special edition of ALN Thursday at 3. And I am happy to say that we're going to be talking with Kimon Onuma about his California BIMin. That's why we started that with the little video of the mamas and papas. We'll be talking with Kimon about that and a number of things in just a second. But first, I'd like to say thank you to our patron members. And thanks to our organizational members. Without them, we would not be able to provide these programs and the many other activities that we're doing in 2022. And we appreciate the growing numbers that we're having. So great thanks to them. And Kimon Onuma is president of Onuma Inc., which is a patron member. So thank you directly, Kimon, and thank you for joining us today. Before we start talking, I do want to explain how this program is going today. Kimon is doing another BIM storm in this summer, and it's called California BIMin because he's got his client, the Los Angeles Community College District, to participate. And before we start talking about what that BIM storm is going to look like, I thought it would be good for us to start talking about what BIM storm is. And before we get to that, let's just talk a little bit. Kimon, it's nice to talk with you again. I've known you since 2001, before BIM was even called BIM, Building Information Models. And you give a little bit of background on yourself. Many people
Sure.
are familiar with you, but it's good to have it on record.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks, ALN, for having me today. Yeah, so I'm an architect, but I've always been interested in technology and beyond just kind of the design and construction of single buildings, but looking at portfolio and facilities and assets, and obviously data gets intertwined between all of that. I'm based in Pasadena, California, and I've been working virtually, actually through the internet for many years. In fact, BIMStorm was part of that, of how do we collaborate and innovate long distance, and especially now with the pandemic, it actually fits right in because it's a way to share information and share resources and learn. So we're constantly looking for new innovative ways and new ideas, and to learn from others as well too. So I'm happy to be here.
And I was very fortunate and honored to be part of the first BIM storm, which the planning started in 2007. And then in 2008, in one day, there were people from around the world, one day meaning 24 hours, there were people working on projects near the Los Angeles Dodgers Stadium. Buildings were popping up on Google Earth left and right. It was really exciting. And in 2008, January 31st, 2008, when that first one occurred, first public one, because Kimon had been working this way with his clients for years. It was really quite exciting and quite a breakthrough at that time. And now with digital twins being a big thing, people are catching up and understanding it. So they're basically online brainstorms using building information models, which not only include the facility assets, but the assets inside the facilities and the ambulances that pull up to the hospital and the helicopters that land on the hospital, any asset related to a building. It provides a great context for people to start planning the full life cycle of their assets, have the information available from that very beginning, capture them in a cloud repository, and have that information available for use throughout the history of the project and the asset. So anything else you want to add to the overview of what BIM storms do, Kimon?
Yeah, it's interesting if we go back to the 2007, 2008 one that you talked about, Mike. There was an article that was written, they called it the Summer of BIM. So we're kind of playing off of that this year. It's kind of a visiting back, kind of with that counterculture angle. So we like to have fun with it too. There's a lot of serious stuff going on, but it also, we want to keep it light and enjoyable to participate in.
And like you said, the pandemic really brought people around because everyone had to start working the way you'd been saying this, because you were an advocate for this process in order to reduce carbon footprints and not have to fly around the world for a 1 hour meeting. Is just very unproductive. And unfortunately, it took a pandemic for people to catch up with you, but that's where we're at now, which is good. So that's exciting that we're having California BIMin. What's in store for this? Oh, before I get to that, it's for private and public. Is there anything that you've learned that crosses over, or is it pretty much owners who are doing private work and public owners are seeing the same benefits?
The pattern is very similar, regardless public or private, scale, whether small or large, complex or simple. It's very similar patterns, and that's what I want to share a little bit of today too, is what we've seen that has worked, and talk about digital twins and everything, but there's similarities across the board. There's the same kind of the code underneath, the genetic code underneath is the same.
And that everyone should just get started. It doesn't matter how much information you have, just use whatever you have. And if your assets are represented as a square box, it does not matter. Just make a square box and put data in the box.
That's right. There you go.
So,
Okay.
California BIM, and you always have interesting titles with Art Curlin, who's on the line with us. We did BIMStorm. I'm forgetting the name of that. What was that?
That was the BIM storm for, let's see, what did we call it? There's so many of them. I lose track too. You threw that on.
Yeah, it was a healthcare
a distance.
BIM storm at a distance. Right. Thank you for that. Yeah, and that was the whole point of it. And we demonstrated how a temporary hospital could be erected in the parking lot of Art Curlin's University Health in San Antonio. And also for the ALN, you did planes, trains, and automobiles, which was the San Jose International Airport, which acted as the owner client, and planes, trains, and automobiles with Mark Giuliani, who's doing some production work for us in the background. And that was planes, trains, and automobiles because the San Jose Airport has a train station right near it where people come from San Francisco to the airport. And there was a need for increased parking because they were adding 10 new gates to the airport. And that actually turned into something that the San Jose Airport actually did. So with this California BIMin, you are already working with the Los Angeles Community College District. So you've got a lot of things in your back pocket already. What is this California BIMin going to look like?
Yeah, should I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll walk through a few slides and I'll open up the website as well too. We have a whole website going. If you go to BIMStorm.com, there's a button in the middle that says go to California BIMin, and you'll see this. And we even have lyrics that go along with the song there.
You do have fun.
Yeah, so we're having fun. But just to start off, we think BIMStorms are part of an organization's asset management planning process because it kind of brings together a lot of different types of assets and visualizes them and makes them easy to get to, and looking for innovative processes in an open way to share information. And some are, like Mike mentioned, they're for owners, like we're working with the US State Department on BIMStorms as well. And then many are open to the public. Most of them are open to the public, and that's what California BIMin is about. And we're going to be talking with ALN about microgrid planning as well too, right, Mike?
Yes.
Parts of BIMStorm. So that's pretty exciting. So a lot of different types of layers kind of come on top of it. But at the core, I keep on reinforcing this, that the technologies around us to do a lot of this stuff. We expect to be able to look on a map and find a place to stay and then push a button and reserve. But imagine if this was just all lists of things or documents. And that's a lot of the asset management from the past kind of comes from this world. So we're trying to break through that and say, hey, this is already possible. And one of the clients that we've been working on for many years now, has been the California Community College system, the whole district, the statewide system, which has over, it's actually more than 71 million now. This is an older slide, but the visual aspect of being able to link assets to a location on a map and being able to pull them up and look at them on screen and attach information to it, and then collaborate with a lot of different technologies and users. So it's not a single application, not a single system, not a single type of user. And if we drill in from the California level and we drill down into the Los Angeles Community College District, this has been going on for about a year now with them. And within a few months, we actually helped them to implement work order, preventive maintenance, custodial planning, get their assets in the system, and hundreds and hundreds of users, and they were surprised how fast it was implemented. The reason it got going fast is because we're not rebuilding from scratch. We're using data assets that they already had, and layering in graphics on top of that they had as well. So we're connecting the dots between different systems and basically bringing it up in an application to be able to do that. So we're going to include the Los Angeles Community College District, which is a huge district. It has over 700 buildings, over 1,000 acres,
How many
10,000 rooms.
campuses?
There's
Do you know?
nine, and there's some annex campuses and whatever. This is what you see on screen right here. So it's basically every single campus, every building.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So anyway, they're going to participate. They're going to be presenting as well too. The facilities group and the asset management, and looking at digital twins as well, and then using kind of the BIMStorm as an exercise to show what they have been doing. So this is from the process for over a year now, and we've had tens of thousands of requests coming in from the system. And the reason it took off so fast is because we did not have to train the end users and say, well, here's a map, here's a building, click on the building, do something with it. So that simplicity is critical. And we were trying to say, okay, there's a lot of complex stuff happening in the background, but the technology is already there today to be able to connect images to data, and then to be able to give it to somebody like an Airbnb approach. So the single source of truth, if we think in terms of infrastructure, this has been critical for us. And this is a lot of owners are struggling with this, but the community colleges has really done a great job of having a foundation at the state level of their space inventory and their conditions of buildings. And this is their system called Fusion. And then they have CAD, BIM, and GIS systems sitting on top of that with asset information. And then they also have this is the critical piece as well too, a way to connect to their data through an API, which means that we can build applications on top of that without having to build the whole infrastructure up. And that's a data owner's data as an asset. And you plug in applications on top of that, including our system and our work order system, and then our partner DabbleFox, who actually uses the same APIs for custodial planning. And from a Lego-based approach, this means that future systems can also plug into this. This is a critical piece. You don't want to just start building things that don't talk to each other, first of all, and you don't want to reinvent the data, and you want to have a source of data, source of truth data, and be able to plug and play applications on top of that to manage your assets. And those applications should be disposable. So if one Lego doesn't work, you unplug it, you plug the next one in. You're not throwing away your asset database in the bottom. And that's what's really making this fly. So with the California BIM Storm, what we're going to do is to invite, first of all, the California community colleges. We have this website, like I mentioned. If you go to the front page here, there's a button that says California BIMin. And this whole page is dedicated to what's happening in this summer. There's a whole series of things. You can sing the song if you'd like. There's a conference happening in Anaheim from June 14th to 16th, where I will be keynoting with Roger Grant from the National Institute of Building Sciences for the Building Smart USA keynote, opening keynote for that. So we'll be setting the stage for open data and how to share information, BIM and CAD and GIS and facilities. And then we're going to be talking again about BIMStorm, kind of a history of where all these data standards have come from, June 15th. Then we also have other sessions, like Roger's going to be talking about the MIB standards. And then California BIMin comes on June 16th, which is the community colleges. So we're going to be there in person, but we also have virtual sessions as well. And surrounding all this before and after the event, this is how BIMStorm has worked in the past too. We set up scenarios, sample scenarios, and actual data. This is the other thing that we really want to make it hands-on as much as possible, not just showing slides, but showing, well, here's the actual data of a facility, of an asset, of systems, and what do you do with that? And so we'll have a whole bunch of stuff happening here. You can sign up for that, and we're going to have virtual sessions. We haven't quite nailed down all the dates yet on the virtual sessions, but we have 2 identified so far. One about life cycle, BIM, and like your life cycle depends on it, and then case studies of where we're going in the future. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot more to this, but this gives you kind of a flavor of some of the things that we're planning, and it's fluid, and all of these BIM storms have been kind of fluid. It kind of moves and changes as we get closer to the date, as more people jump in to participate. But the invitation is just jump in. There's no, you can basically join, and if you have, especially if you have an approach or an application or a solution or a problem that you're trying to solve, like Mike, you're talking about microgrids. Maybe this is a good chance to talk about that a little bit. Do you want to?
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing your screen, and we've got a question that I just want to get to immediately so that we don't lose track of that. Gene asks if what the asset registry software is. Is it a commercial off-the-shelf software, or is it a proprietary database?
It's those Legos that I described. There's a lot of different assets. So there's building assets, there's systems assets, and there's multiple systems. There's no single application that does it all. So for the statewide level, there's a system called Fusion, which is their space inventory, facility condition, what's inside the buildings and spaces, and they own that because they use that to plan for new facilities. Sitting on top of that, they also have a GIS system, which is using Esri and then also open standard GIS. And then they also use building information modeling like Revit, for example, for their individual buildings. And then we have our application called the Onuma system sitting on top of, connected to that. In the Onuma system, we have assets and buildings, and then we also go down to the equipment level, which is then used for work order management.
So, Gene, it's a really good question. Fusion was established by the California Community College District when you met with them first. That was already existing. Is that correct, Kimon?
That's correct, yes.
And it's a combination of their own software with, so it's a customized version of a commercial off the shelf?
It's a customized version. They built it pretty much from scratch, but they initially built it to be able to decide on bond program money, where they're going to spend resources. You know, without knowing what your assets are, they couldn't decide where do we spend money, do we build a new laboratory or not. So it's their inventory of spaces that cuts across the entire state. And yeah, they've had it for many years, and when we got involved with them, we actually encouraged them to open access to it. That's where the Legos come in. It's okay, you have great data, consultants and other owners or other applications need to talk to that, and we opened that up for them over a decade ago. And to this date, I think it's one of the most successful API implementations of an inventory that is accessible and usable by other applications, I think. And I know a lot of owners are trying to do this, but it's not always an easy thing, even though technically it's not difficult to do. It's more of a governance and a decision to do it.
Right. So do you know what Fusion was based on?
It's built on it was originally on a SQL database.
Okay.
Microsoft SQL. It didn't have an API initially, and we basically guided them on building the API on top of that. And they've recently rebuilt it over the last 2 or 3 years. They've modernized it, and they've been adding different modules, you know, like inventory, and then also doing site assessments and financial data connected to it.
And the secret sauce of BIMStorms and everything that you're talking about is what you taught me a long time ago. Use open standards, secure open standards, but use the open standards. And it's only through the use of the open standards that the APIs work, just like the internet.
Yeah, it's open standards, open access. It's not a free for all. You can still control it. But a lot of the questions typically tend toward, well, what application do we use to do that? And it's good to have the right applications, but a lot of these apps from the past, they tend to trap the data in proprietary formats because that's their business model, and then sell you access to that. that's not scalable, especially if we start talking about wanting to do a lot of other things, microgrids and energy and scenario planning and digital twins, all that. There's no single system that does it all. So you need systems to talk to each other. And owners can really drive that. That's why we kind of focused on working with a lot of owners on those strategies of, okay, how do you own your data, and how do you share your data, and how do you maintain it over time, and how do you allow others to access it if you need them to, and what rules do you set up, how do you secure it, all those things.
The owners have to drive it.
They have to drive it. Yeah.
Yes, they have to own that process and say, we want to own our data.
Exactly.
And that's not common. A lot of owners want to be able to blame someone. And so as we're finding, more and more of this is not about the tools and processes. Those all work. It's the owners taking the leadership and committing to an open, secure set of standards. And that's why I loved ISO 55000 when I first found out about that, is because it requires that the owners do that and that they involve all relevant stakeholders and then start building the culture of an asset management environment. I didn't know that that's what BIMStorms were doing, but as soon as I found out about asset management, I knew it was peanut butter and jelly. It was a perfect combination. So Ryan Gear, who I met during that first BIMStorm, asks about how to get involved in California BIMin. And so that goes back to the microgrid question. And the Asset Leadership Network has asked Kimon if we can do some microgrid planning for the Los Angeles Community College District. And it turns out that part of their long-term plan is to increase the use of microgrids in order to meet the rising demand for energy and the different uses for energy, such as electric vehicles. Kimon, can you say anything about what their microgrid needs are or what they're thinking there?
I don't have the details of it, but I know that they've been piloting a project on one of the 9 campuses that I showed you. And they presented that, and I think hopefully I think they're going to present a little bit more of it at the conference as well too. And from a scenario planning perspective in BIMStorm, what we found over the years too, that obviously there's a lot of technology happening, but the biggest deal is getting kind of subject matter experts and opinions, engineering opinions, planning opinions, and collaboration happening. So it's not only about technology, it's also about making decisions and communicating those, and then capturing that in the BIMStorm, and then having the next group do something else with it. So if you're an engineer and making a decision on what's the strategy of how to reduce energy, and you say, well, here's 3 different ways of doing it. We capture those, and we do planning against it. Which one is going to cost more? Which is going to take how much time? Who's going to be involved with it? And then landing it on a map and showing where these things are going to happen. Then having that graphical view, then you can go to the next, open it up to the next set of participants. Say, okay, we'll do another analysis of that, plan a building around this, or plan an extension around this. That's kind of the scenario plan, and it's in a condensed time frame too. So that's what triggers these new ideas.
Yeah, I had the privilege of helping Kimon write his seminal chapter of an AIA book on integrated practice. And he described what the 21st century architect was going to do. And he said that an 8-month planning process will be reduced to 8 hours. I was like, no way, that can't happen. And sure enough, I was wrong. And it's even less time than that, because when you get the right people together with the right information and the visuals that help them say, I see what you're talking about, boom, 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 they can make decisions much quicker and with much more assurance, eliminating risk, which is a big driver in all of this.
Yeah, the reduction of time is one thing, and it's not across the board. Certain things still take time, but there's a lot of inefficiencies in all the design and construction and asset management processes that can be made more efficient. And then when you start thinking in terms of capturing everything digitally, then you start layering artificial intelligence, which is coming online, right? A lot of different things. If you have access to information, then either humans or machines can do things with that information. And humans hopefully going to be more involved with the more difficult decisions, and machines will help us become more efficient and reduce time in other areas to increase efficiency or reduce errors, reduce risk, all of that.
I really see BIM storms as being a basis for an organization to establish the foundation of their artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You get the people together and you do some arm wrestling in the virtual world and say, okay, this works. Let's do this and repeat this process. And then they can use it to create an asset in that the artificial intelligence can then be used by other organizations of a similar type. But that's just my own perspective on how to use BIM storms. So in May, we'll do something related to a microgrid. Hopefully you'll introduce us to the folks at LA Community College District that are doing that. We've got people lined up that are interested in providing expertise on that, and we'll provide information. And then I know Ryan Gear, who asked the question about how to participate, is now involved with DIRT, which is do it right the first time. I forget exactly what the R's are for, but anyhow, they create prefabricated components of buildings, and that would be perfect. It might not fit in with the micro. Sure, the microgrid needs an office, and we'll have DIRT create the office for the microgrid.
Mm-hmm.
So Ryan, you're now committed. So very quickly, we burned through a half hour. We can go on talking about this forever, but Kimon, let's see what these two questions just popped up. Do it right this time. There's 2 T's is what Ryan said. And he says, okay, he's going to be willing to create the microgrid office. Anything you want to say about, in closing, about the California BIMin that's coming up?
Yeah, I think one thing is, as far as doing it right too, we found over the years, and there's a lot of confusion in the industry sometimes with putting too much complexity into something and then not being able to solve it. We like to break it down into simple chunks. Keeping it simple is important, but having a big idea is also important too. And I found with digital twins, there's a lot of excitement about digital twins and 3D and all that stuff, which is great. But I see a lot of failures too of things that become too complex and too heavy and then never take off. So it's a balancing act. But when you start collaborating like this, you can take very simple ideas and start plugging them together, and it turns into a very complex kind of an overall system. And that's when it becomes really powerful, I think, the collaborative part. And that goes back to the open standards and open data approach.
It goes back to the Legos. They are simple individual pieces, but when you're thoughtful about how you put them together, you can create a Lego museum. And there are Lego museums all over the world with incredible things. In Chicago, the Museum of Contemporary Art has a Lego exhibit right now. So thank you, Kimon, for establishing the simple approach to addressing complex asset management problems, including facility asset management problems and the problems that are related to all the assets that go into and around a building. And thank you to our audience for attending. Please contact me or the ALN about upcoming activities. And let me share my screen again to close out and thank our, I'll go in reverse. We'll thank our organizational sponsors. Yeah. I thought it would go in reverse. And we'll thank our patron members also. Hold on one second. Should have had Kevin do this. Kevin, you're there? If you're able to.
Yes.
Why don't you do your job? I shouldn't have stepped on your job.
Okay. Let's although I have apparently
Kevin Decker is the ALN technical consultant.
Patron members, thank you very much, as well as our organizational members. Here they all are. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring you any of our programs, including this one today. So thank you, all of our members.
And thank you, Kevin. And once again, thank you, Kimon, and to all of our attendees.